Welcome to Your Personal Power Pod, a podcast about aligning yourself with the life you want. And here are your hosts, Sandy Abel and Shannon Young.
Shannon, how are you today?
I am well. I am having one of those days where I feel like things could go sideways in conversations, when you just feel a little bit on edge.
Oh, dear.
So I'm reflecting on our episode, Dealing with Conflict. So I thought that while we're taking a little break to plan for season 5, we might reach back into our archives and talk about dealing with conflict and how to do that in a productive way.
This is always an important topic, especially nowadays. There seems to be too much conflict and dissension and just people not being able to listen to each other in the world. How about you? What's happening in your world?
Just feeling prickly and not wanting to get into it with anybody.
Good call.
A lot of that means reining in my prickliness. Conflict is inevitable. It is part of life, and how you choose to deal with it makes all the difference.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about today.
So please enjoy this episode, Dealing with Conflict.
One of our listeners asked us to talk about conflict. She was talking about either family conflict or between friends or in groups of people or even at work. Her issue was both politics and religion. These days, those are really hot buttons for a lot of people, and they are the cause of a lot of conflict.
Yes. And you mentioned an interesting thing when we were discussing the topic before we started recording, which was for many of us, disagreement and conflict are synonymous, and they're not by definition the same thing.
Absolutely not. And it's really important for people to understand the difference because we disagree about all kinds of things. What to have for dinner or where to go on a walk, just all kinds of things we disagree about, but it doesn't turn into a conflict. And it's important for all of us to realize that even the bigger topics like religion and politics don't have to be a conflict. If you can have a conversation and not expect somebody else to instantly go your way and go, oh, that's right. Okay, you got it. And if they don't, you need to try to persuade them. If you just have a disagreement about something, it's totally okay. That's human nature. A conflict is when there's a clash and it becomes heated or violent or out of control, and when it becomes personal and emotional.
Yes. And I think one of the podcast episodes that we did earlier in the season was about anger and how anger is a cover-up emotion. And if you're responding to somebody who disagrees with you with anger, it probably means that there's something else going on. And that if you can challenge yourself to get to the root of what you're actually feeling and why you're feeling that way, then it will help you figure out why your disagreement is becoming a conflict.
Right, exactly. Conflict can happen when friends, family members, or groups have different beliefs and views on something. And the problem happens when they take it, like you said, to anger. They make it emotional. It becomes personal. I don't know what's happened in the last couple of years, but people have gotten adamant about their political beliefs and their religious beliefs and their beliefs about the right way to behave towards other people. And it's gone way beyond, I believe this, you believe that, and that's just fine. I will respect your right to do that, and you respect my right to do what I do. People don't seem to be able to do that anymore. And I'm not sure what happened. What do you think?
I think a lot of things happened politically, and that things that should not have been political became political or were made political. I think it's dangerous to hazard into that territory because then it becomes a political discussion, and we can certainly do that at another time, but I don't know that that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, that's what we're about.
I think one of the factors has to do with the way we as individuals and as political groups and as religious groups envision the future of this country.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed Roger Limbaugh on a radio show I had several years ago, who is Rush Limbaugh's brother. I didn't agree with most of what he said, but one of the things he said that really struck a chord with me was that people in general used to have a shared vision for the future of the country, and that is no longer the case. And I do believe that is playing largely into the heated conversations that we're seeing across the political spectrum and the religious spectrum today. But that makes this episode all the more important, because those things that we all kind of as a group, and I shouldn't say we all, there have always been factions that had a different viewpoint, but there was a majority of people who felt a certain way about where this country was going. And that's what we were kind of all, that was the track we were all sort of on. And now we're not on that track. So there is conflict. And unless you want your life to be spent arguing and hating on people, which is what is happening, then learning how to deal with different viewpoints can bring peace into your life.
Is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think the first thing that we all need to do is look at how conflict was dealt with when you were a child, when you were being raised. When there was a disagreement, what did your parents do? Did they yell and scream at each other? Did they hit? Did they throw things? Did they sit down and calmly discuss something? Did they respect each other's thoughts and opinions? It's so important to look at where you come from and how you were taught to deal with a disagreement, and whether it would instantly escalate into a conflict or if it would just be a disagreement.
If for no other reason than to figure out where your baseline is. What did you learn?
Exactly.
What feeds into the way you're operating today, and how can that be changed, or do you need to go back to that?
Right. Are you even paying attention to how you react, or is it just a second nature thing that you learned when you were 3 and you do it when somebody disagrees or when there's some kind of challenge to what you're doing or thinking? Do you automatically go to the default place of when you were a child, or have you matured enough to stop and look and think and pay attention to how you want to respond?
Mm-hmm.
We each need to pay attention to that.
You know, I don't want to make this sound like the good old days, because there have always been problems in our society, for sure. But back when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, there seemed to be a societal norm that you were respectful to people in the world.
Yes.
Maybe it was not like that in your household, but out in the world, there was an expectation that you would have some manners and not just yell at people because they disagreed with you.
Yeah, respect. Yeah,
right.
Perfect.
And then that's not the behavior that gets rewarded these days. If you look at social media and you look at reality shows and you look at politics, there seems to be this overriding philosophy that any behavior goes as long as it leads to the outcome you want. The ends justify the means.
Right.
It's entirely possible that we are just reacting to what's happening in society, and it's acceptable now to yell at people in the world. It's acceptable to be rude. It's acceptable to be a jerk if you don't like what somebody's saying or doing.
Which is such a sad thing.
Which is very
so
sad. Yes. And I think at a gut level, we all know that that feels awful, and it's not the world we want to live in, but it is the world that is being perpetuated. If you're struggling in your life, or you're feeling hostile towards the world and there's something just icky inside you, it may be because you're buying into that behavior. It may be time to start thinking about how do I respect somebody else, even if they think or act differently than I agree with.
Right. Well, step back and think for yourself. Don't just follow what's become the norm.
Yes.
And don't decide that it's your job to change the attitudes of the world or the person you're talking to. In this country, fortunately, we do have the right to have our own opinions and our own thoughts on things. The government doesn't throw us in jail for them unless we act out and destroy things.
Mm-hmm.
But we can think, believe anything we want. And we need to allow that of each other.
Yes.
Instead of thinking, oh, well, you believe that and that's just wrong. And so I'm going to explain to you why it's wrong. And I'm probably going to get heated in the process. What you do when you do that is lose all your personal power. You're not in control of yourself. You're not taking care of what you want to take care of. You're just ranting like a child having a tantrum. That is not powerful, and it's damaging.
And if what you really want is to change somebody's mind, you're not going to if you're yelling at them.
Oh, absolutely not. The minute you raise your voice or become emotional or personal and attack, they shut down. So nothing is going to change. If you really think you want to try to change somebody, sit and have a calm discussion. And I think we're back to having a disagreement instead of a conflict.
So what do you do when you find yourself in a disagreement?
You first of all decide if the issue is worth arguing over, what to have for dinner. That could be a disagreement, but it may not be worth arguing over. Stay unemotional. Don't make it personal. Don't make it about you, and don't make it about the other person. Everybody involved needs to agree to listen to the other person and negotiate instead of fight. Identify what you want the discussion to accomplish. Do you want to be heard? Do you want to change their mind? Do you want a different behavior? Do you want them to see your point of view? Get clear about that with yourself. Know that the discussion doesn't have to escalate into a conflict. As long as you keep it unemotional and calm, then it's a sharing of ideas. And also respectful, like you said. If you're not being respectful, don't even go there. Don't even have a discussion, because it instantly escalates into conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Take a deep breath. Smile. Tell yourself to leave your body out of this. It's very hard to get all worked up if you are breathing deeply and smiling and relaxed. You can't be worked up and angry and relaxed at the same time. Listen to the other person's thoughts. Ask that they listen to your thoughts. And then if you need to find a solution, negotiate or discuss, find a way to meet in the middle. That way it will stay a discussion and a disagreement and not escalate into a conflict.
I want to clarify one point about the very first step, which was decide if the issue is worth fighting over.
Uh-huh.
A lot of what's being argued over in our society today, I think, is definitely worth, if not fighting over, discussing. But
Sure.
It may not be worth fighting over or discussing with the person who's in front of you.
Yes.
Like the issue may be
Yes.
important, but do I need to fight about this with
Of
my
course.
brother, or do I need to take this up with City Hall?
Yes, exactly. Or with the clerk in the grocery store.
Right.
You're never going to see again.
Right.
That's a very good point. You do have to decide if the person or people you are talking with are the right ones for you to even be sharing your thoughts with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't care. They don't want to hear it. They're not going to be respectful. So don't go there. Just because you believe something doesn't mean you have to go out in the world and proselytize because you are speaking to people who may not care at all.
Yes.
Good point, Shan.
If we want to talk about racism, that's absolutely worth talking about. Do I need to fight about it with the guy pumping gas? Probably not. And if I'm going to invest the energy, I should probably invest it wisely.
Exactly. And there are all kinds of things that are very important and worth talking about and being clear where you're coming from. But you're not going to change the mind of the guy pumping gas.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not worth the effort or worth getting yourself worked up about. If you're going to have a disagreement, make sure that it's a topic that you need to discuss with the person or people that you're discussing with. And if not, don't go there.
Let it go.
Yes, absolutely. And if they are the people that you want to have this discussion with, make sure you stay unemotional. And that's what you do if it escalates into a conflict. If somebody else gets really worked up and starts hollering and yelling, first of all, get up and leave because it's gone off the rails and you're not going to accomplish anything. But also, it's important to stay calm and put your emotions aside. Separate the problem from the person. And that's also a really important thing to do if you're having a disagreement. Realize that you and the other person may not agree on a particular issue, but you still have your relationship. Like I know parents and adult kids who disagree on politics, but they're still parents and kids, and they still love each other, and they have lifetime history together. It's important for all of them to stay clear that we're having this discussion. Hopefully it doesn't escalate into a conflict, but we're having this discussion. But over here is our relationship, and we still love each other a lot, regardless of the fact that we disagree about this other thing. That is so important. You have to separate the problem from the person.
Talk about the box.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this in another episode. When my husband and I first got together, we were having a disagreement about something, and I had been in a relationship before where every time we disagreed, he would say, well, maybe we just shouldn't be together. Maybe we should just end this. It's like, no, we're talking about what color to paint the bedroom. You don't throw the whole thing away. But he was all about, well, if we can't agree, we're just no good together. And so when my husband and I had a disagreement when we were first together, I said, are you questioning our marriage? And he said, oh my gosh, no. He said, I put that in a little golden treasure box, and it's way over here, out of the way. Our love and our marriage and our family is all safe over there. And we just leave it there. We don't open that box. And now we can come back to the center and discuss what color to paint the bedroom. You know, it's not about whether we have a relationship or not. It's just about what the current issue or situation is. And that was such a freeing thing. We've been married 40 years, and the little golden box just stays over there out of the way so we can move ahead and live our life and work things out if we need to without it threatening the relationship. And that is such an important thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So what about you, Shan?
I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I wish I could remember the gentleman's name. He was a civil rights leader who wound up being the Black principal of a school that was becoming integrated. He was talking about how he brought white families and Black families together, and he had found a ball, and one side of the ball was green, one side of the ball was red. And he said, I can use this as a teaching tool. So he held it up at a meeting with one side facing him and one side facing the white audience, and said, what color is this ball? And they said, it's red, obviously. And he said, yeah, but my side is green. So neither one of us is wrong. But if you were to look at things from my point of view, you might see the ball is a different color than it looks like from your point of view. And I thought that's beautiful, because even if
it is,
you feel so strongly about something, it is entirely possible that the other person feels exactly the same way you do, only about something different.
Yeah.
And neither one of you can be wrong. You might both be right. So
exactly.
Taking a stand and risking ruining relationships, and I'm guilty of this because I will fight, And it's been
Yes, you
very much a challenge. And I'm sure my husband would tell you that he has lost years off his life fighting with me, that I will fight and I will dig in. And if you get louder, I will dig in further. And I really had to learn.
Of course. And you have conflict.
Yes. And it's required a whole lot of getting clear about, why do I feel so strongly about needing to be validated here?
And with you, it sounds like it might not even be the issue.
Exactly.
And that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
That self-knowledge really helps you be able to decide, do I want this disagreement to turn into a conflict?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not worth it.
And being able to say, you know what? I don't think we should talk about this, can be
absolutely
a huge gift you give not only somebody else, but yourself.
Exactly.
And I'm not advocating for avoidance. Just sometimes today is not the day.
Yes. And maybe never is the time, because if each of you are totally entrenched in where you're coming from, you're probably not going to change each other's minds. If you can respectfully listen to each other's attitudes and thoughts and beliefs, great. It may not change your mind, but at least you'll both feel heard. But if you can't, and if your purpose is just to get them to think like you do, that's going nowhere. So walk away.
Yeah. Okay. So
there are a couple more things you can do if a disagreement is escalating into a conflict. Communicate your side of the issue clearly and honestly. Define the problem and stick to the topic. Don't bring up old stuff or things that don't apply to this discussion. Respect the other person's point of view by paying attention and listening. Don't interrupt or attack the other person while they're speaking. Show that you understand what they're saying. Doesn't mean you agree, but you understand by using your active listening skills and asking questions. Speak clearly, unemotionally, and reasonably. Stop the discussion, like you said, if emotions get high. Take time to cool off and agree to meet in an hour, or agree that it wasn't worth having a conflict over anyway and let it go. Remember to try to find points of common ground. Be willing to compromise. Together, come up with as many solutions as you can. Make sure everyone understands the chosen solution and realize you'll probably not change a mind. You can just agree to disagree. Peaceful resolution depends on negotiation and respect for the other person. That's that little golden box over to the side, even if you don't respect their point of view. The bottom line is stay unemotional.
Yeah, Dad is the best at this.
He is very good.
Yeah, he's amazing. If it comes to some kind of customer service issue and he didn't get the service that he needed or paid for, or something didn't come together right, he can get on the phone and within 20 minutes be talking to the head of the company without ever once losing his cool. Right. It's unreal.
Yes.
Because he has a magic word. Yeah, nevertheless, which doesn't help if you're communicating with somebody you're having a conflict with, but it does work as far as customer service goes.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. They say, well, we're short-staffed and we have this problem and there's a supply chain issue. And you say, I understand that. And I'm sure that's very difficult for you. Nevertheless, and then you state your position.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, when you're having a discussion or a disagreement, do all you can to avoid having it turn into a conflict. Agree that both parties have to want to work things out. And if they don't waste your time.
Yeah.
Stay unemotional. Calmly share your thoughts and listen to what the other person has to say. Keep your relationship out of it and stick to the issue. Stay respectful and non-confrontational, work together to find a solution, or agree to disagree. And be sure to keep it separate from your overall relationship. I have a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. It says, "An eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind." So,
so true.
wise guy, wise man, very wise man. Just make sure a disagreement does not escalate into a conflict.
I think it all comes down to respect, and not just respect for the other person, respect for yourself. You don't respect yourself when you lose your cool.
Not at all. And you give away all your personal power. And our podcast is about your personal power, and you lose it when you get emotional and start to rant. Hang on to your power, stay calm, and discuss.
We want to hear from you, whether it's your stories about how self-esteem and personal power affect your life, or topics you'd like us to address in future episodes. Thank you to our listener who requested we talk about conflict today. Also, we'd love for you to review our podcast, and you can do that by visiting yourpersonalpowerpod.com. Click contact, drop us an email. We look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, find your power and change your life.